It's as good an acting performance as I've seen. I think her face is just a brilliant canvas for emotion, and she's able to display so much subtlety without going so big. There's a lot of just like quiet moments, small moments, where it felt like we had an inner monologue for her character.
Welcome, friends, to episode 370 of the Ink to Film podcast, where we read the book and then see the movie. I'm filmmaker James Bailey.
And I'm writer Luke Elliott.
And this week we discuss Chloé Zhao's 2025 film, Hamnet. So last week we talked about Hamnet, the book, which Maggie O'Farrell wrote, obviously. Check out that episode if you haven't already. I think this is going to be a nice companion piece for that. This film's getting a lot of Oscar buzz. We were very excited about it. And, of course, we talked last week, Maggie O'Farrell wrote the screenplay for this film as well. Which
co-wrote.
Chloé Zhao co-wrote, which I actually learned a little bit about that. It was a very interesting process because they were doing it basically across the world and through voice memos. Yeah, so we'll talk more about that. But, you know, Chloé Zhao is a director that I respect, and like I've seen Nomadland and I've seen Eternals, obviously, which was her blockbuster foray recently. And then going back to The Rider, which was an excellent film as well. And I found, especially with like Nomadland, was a film where I was like really drawn to her sense of humanity. Like there's like a true and like genuine feel of like what it means to be human in her films. And I think Eternals, obviously, there's a lot of cooks in the kitchen with something like that for Marvel. And yeah, I think that movie gets a lot of hate, and I don't think it necessarily deserves it. I thought it was a fine Marvel film. Now we're into a film, Hamnet, here, which we read the book for, which was, you know, just incredibly moving, and it's so weighty because it's got the capital L legend Shakespeare as like the framework of it.
Yeah.
But so I was interested to see how Chloe would bring her kind of signature style of it being like really grounded. And man, if I wasn't impressed by it in this film, like it's like she tends to work with these cinematographers that really just bring nature to life and like show, like lay bare humanity and like the humanness of characters. And to have that for someone like Shakespeare, and especially for Agnes, which I guess we should talk about now. Last week we said Agnes a lot because we were reading the book, and Agnes is how it's pronounced.
That's how they pronounce it in the movie, at least. Yeah.
In the movie, yeah, which I think is like the correct pronunciation per the
Probably,
time period.
Yeah.
Anyway, here we are. Luke, what did you think about this film?
Yeah, man. It is my second ever Chloé Zhao movie. I've only ever seen Eternals from her. And I didn't like that movie very much, but I agree with you that it was kind of a fine Marvel movie. But for me, a fine Marvel movie is generally one I don't like, because I'm at the point now where I need them to be pretty exceptional for them to register for me, because the formula has gotten kind of played. I do remember there being interesting things about it. It looked good. I remember certain things I liked about that movie, but I would say like that I knew was a little bit of an outlier. Like I knew that she had sort of made her name in the indie space and had gotten her sort of chance at the blockbuster, which you often see happen with some of these directors who start making a name for themselves. So I wasn't necessarily going to like hold that against her. I was curious to see what she was going to do with a movie that feels like she had more control over, right? Like didn't have the studio meddling, didn't have, you know, overarching Marvel MCU pressure to like have certain things be in there. And
were you familiar with the fact that like she had won like Best Director at the Oscars?
I had heard that she won for Nomadland. I never saw that movie, but you know that there's a lot of movies I don't see. So that's kind of where I was at, sort of director wise. We had just read this book last week, and I will point you to that episode because I think the book by Maggie O'Farrell is excellent and deserves to be considered in its own right. I loved that book. I think I was pretty, close to raving about it perhaps last week. I definitely was very glowing in my review of it. So if anything, when that happens, sometimes I'm a little worried that now my expectations and my hopes for this movie are quite elevated. I really feel like this movie nailed that part of it. It rose to the occasion, and I think there's a few things about it where I can see it could be divisive for audiences. And I mean that in the truest way, because I think there's an attention to emotion in this film that I found to be profound and unique. And I think really spoke to having a woman director working with a woman who wrote the original material, focusing on the story of a woman, and taking the emotions of Agnes and making those the focus of the film. You run the risk of getting into maudlin territory, or maybe a little bit of like emotional manipulation. I think that's going to be where I could see some people, if they don't like this movie as much, might feel like, oh, it really wants me to be sad here, or it really wants me to feel this emotion, and it's hitting me with music, and it's doing everything it can to evoke this emotion, and it feels like they're pushing me there. But for those of us that it worked for, and that's me, I think this movie earns those moments, and that is what makes the difference, I think, between a film that is manipulative and a film that is just like going for emotion. Like, it is a movie about emotion, it is a movie about grief, and it is a movie about the power of art to sort of unite all of us and share that and make it part of your legacy. And even if the people who are consuming your art aren't familiar with the grief directly, you're able to connect with them through the thing you've created. And so I think it works in all of those ways, and so it earns those emotional beats that are huge. They're big swings, and they're not something that I think we're used to seeing, because I feel like so many directors are going to be afraid to go there, and they're going to want to pull back. Whereas I think this really leans into it, and it makes it what this movie's about. It's the main driving force of the movie. It is like, if you want to feel something, this is a movie to go see. And we've talked in the past about how, like, that's what I want. I don't always want to feel these kinds of emotions, but I want to feel something. And so I'm drawn to films where I connect with them emotionally and feel strongly about them. And for me, this was absolutely that.
Yeah, very cool. I thought for a second you were leaning like on the other side. I know you were playing a little bit of devil's advocate.
I'm playing
there,
a little bit of devil's advocate, which maybe I shouldn't do, but like, I don't know. I start to anticipate, you know. I'm like, I can see like how some people might not feel the way that I feel. Yeah. And I guess I'm getting ahead of it, and I'm sort of acknowledging that could be a reaction to it. And plus, like, some listeners might come in with similar thoughts, and I'm not saying you're wrong. And we'll talk about all these different moments and kind of weigh each of them individually, I guess, as we go. But
well, especially in terms of what you talked about, like, emotion is something that's like so individual to the specific person, and especially how a story may hit you. And that's like how I try to talk about the things on this podcast, is like, how did it emotionally affect me? How, from a craft perspective, did I see, like, what were the intentions of the filmmaker, and ultimately, like, how did that come to fruition? And so for me, it almost feels like there's two films here in a sense, or maybe three films, and I'll maybe talk about why that is. But we start out and there's sort of this like love story. I don't think it's a spoiler to say that.
Which, by the way, we're going to stay relatively spoiler free here, and then we'll move into a more general spoiler section in case you're new to the podcast.
And that feels like it's like sort of a small film there, and then it transitions, and you could just call this like acts 1, 2, and 3 probably too, like as far as the story structure. Yeah. And then act 2, the other film, is like about joy and grief and like all these emotions that are inevitable for everybody who lives this life. And then the third part is like that legacy, the weave of how this falls into the legacy of Shakespeare. And I think it all culminates in something that I found to be very profound and very emotional. Like, I was moved consistently throughout this film, and I want to give specific credit to performances. Jessie Buckley, I think this is like her career defining role that I've seen from her so far. Like, she was so convincing to me as this character, and she had like I think what you're talking about with like a director maybe wanting to pull back, she had this performance that was like almost like animalistic, and like it was so elemental, like it was so like raw. I just found it to be like really powerful all throughout the film.
Yeah, so I think there's going to be a lot of praise heaped on Jessie Buckley for this movie. I anticipate, I mean, she's already won a Golden Globe for it.
She's gonna win it all.
And we know the Oscars are coming, and I think, like, I don't know. I haven't seen all of the movies, that are being nominated, so I can't say for sure, but
I'm getting there.
This is a performance that is astounding to me. It's the one to talk about. I think Paul Mescal is good in this movie as well, but I think this is the one where it's as good an acting performance as I've seen. I think her face is just a brilliant canvas for emotion. And she's able to display so much subtlety without going so big. There's a lot of just like quiet moments, small moments, where it felt like we had an inner monologue for her character. Now, yes, I've read the book, so maybe that helps a little bit. But it felt like we had an inner monologue for her character. But we didn't. We were just looking at her face. But I felt like I knew I could just like, maybe not exactly what she was thinking, because there's a lot of mystery to the character too. But you got a sense. And to where I never felt like I needed it, right? I love that about her performance. And then you get those moments like you talked about where she goes raw and, we have a powerful grief, powerful pain, joy, fear. There's so many emotions that she goes through. She goes through the whole gamut.
And early in the film, I would say like she's immediately so likable.
Yeah.
She's immediately so captivating. The joy and the like, she pulls you in. And then, like you said, she also nails the other side of that coin with all the stuff that she goes through. And I don't know. It's like you said, it's just, I mean, it's incredible. It's to the point that like everything else in the film, and an otherwise great film as well, like I think genuinely great film, is overshadowed by like how amazing this is like a, like a monolith kind of performance that I'm like, holy shit.
Yeah, it's astounding. And like, I sometimes start to doubt, because it's not really my medium. Like I talk about film a lot. I've been doing it for almost 10 years now with you. And so sometimes I meet people and they're like, oh, you're the film guy. And I'm like, not really. Like I'm more the book guy on the podcast, and like we watch movies and talk about them, but I'm not someone who watches them, like tons of movies outside of that every year. I watch some, but not like people who are like real film people,
Well, you're also not like you're not on set with actors often.
Well, that for sure.
That sort of thing, yeah.
But regardless, like I have opinions about acting. I like to talk about acting because I feel like it's a piece of the art that I think can sometimes get taken for granted, or people feel like it's almost beyond something you can really talk about. Because it's so subjective, perhaps. But performances like this, for me, illustrate the difference between a spectacular, career-defining, or even just like the more powerful, moving, and effective performances that you'll see, and maybe more standard performance you might get where they do the job, and like the character is fine, and the performance is fine. And there's so much magic that has to go into that. I understand, like the writing has to be right, the direction has to be right. There's so many other things that go in there, but there is an art by the performer. There's a reason why these actors are so sought after by these directors, because I think some are truly capable of it, and others maybe not so. But we've seen from her, Jessie Buckley, she's incredible. We loved her in I'm Thinking of Ending Things, another one we covered on this podcast. I think we both raved about her as like the stand-up from that movie.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of great acting in that movie as well.
I was thinking about it, like where I first saw her, and it would have been in Chernobyl, which I forgot about.
Oh yeah, she's the wife of the fireman.
The firefighter. Yep.
Yeah,
exactly.
She's incredible in that. Oh my
Great
God, you just unlocked that for me, because I love Chernobyl. I've seen it several times now, and as soon as you said it, I'm like, of course that's her. But like, yeah, I didn't connect that until just now, and she's so moving in that role too.
A couple of years ago, I saw her in Wicked Little Letters too, which was fun, like sort of Olivia Colman thing. They were kind of having a feud back and forth, and it was just like a fun, very British film. Mm-hmm. She was in Men, the A24 film. She was in Fargo season 4. The TV show.
Which one's season 4? Is that
she's the nurse. I don't want to say too much.
I don't think I saw that season. Maybe I stopped after season 3. I've been wanting to get back to that show. I just don't have like a streaming service that it's on, I don't think. But it's been one of those shows I want to get back to. Part of it being a kind of anthology means that I'm like, I don't feel as compelled because it's kind of like a whole new story, and I'm like, oh, I'll get to it at some point, but it doesn't feel as pressing. Regardless, I do like that show a lot, and that's cool to hear that she's in it.
She's great. Yeah. There's this new movie coming out too, called The Bride. That's like a Frankenstein, Bride of Frankenstein kind of thing.
Is she in that?
Yeah, she's like the bride. So she's I'm very much looking forward to seeing that as well.
I didn't know she was in that. That's awesome. That's the like Maggie Gyllenhaal version, right?
Yes.
Speaking of Frankenstein, spoilers for later. Stick around until after our final rating on book versus movie. Anyway, yeah, I think I'm going to continue to just praise her performance. I saw so normally I don't do a lot of like extracurricular research on movie episodes, because I want to be surprised when you bring me information. But this is one I went and saw it with my wife. Maybe we can kind of move into theater going experience here a little bit.
Yeah,
Went and saw it with my wife. We had invited some friends out who weren't able to come, so it kind of ended up being more of a date movie anyway. And then it was a powerful experience. I teared up I think 3 different times during the movie, and then at the end had like a good cry. And that's unusual for me in general, but not unheard of. Especially unusual for me in a theater. I feel like I'm less likely to be able to like reach that state. And then I would say it also I was not alone. There was this, and I look at it now as kind of funny moment at the end of the film where the kind of credits roll and there's just kind of like a quiet and you hear some like sniffling. And normally there's this kind of shuffle as a bunch of people start getting up to leave. And, like, nobody moves. I mean, maybe 1 or 2. But, like, for the most part, nobody moves. This is a pretty full theater, by the way. And everybody had to, like, take a few minutes to, like, collect themselves, to check on the person they're with, and be like, are you okay? Like, are you ready to go? Like, I think everybody kind of knew, like, I'm not ready to get up right now and be seen in the light of day. Give me a minute. And just kind of, like, there was, like, a hangover of that final scene, which we don't want to spoil, but... that lasts, and it's that was a memorable moment for me, like as a theater going experience where you might lose a little bit of that when you're at home, being just surrounded by people who are having like a similar experience.
I love that with a film too, where you're like, I mean, it's a range of different things that can happen, but where you just sit there after a film, like the credits start rolling, and you're like, fuck. You're like, whether it's like this like overwhelming sadness, whether it's just like you can't believe the journey that you've just been taken on, and you're just like digesting it. And that's why I love like not popping up immediately and running out of the theater. And like
you always get that. Like I remember going to at the end of No Country for Old Men. I was like having this profound experience, and like when some of the people nearby me were like, "Oh, fuck this movie," and like got up at like angry, and like it's like people. Some people have different reactions to movies, and like it depends on like what kind of theater you're at. We are at like a kind of an indie theater here in Portland, so I feel like kind of the best circumstance. This is a movie that's come back around now and is having like another little theatrical run in advance of the Oscars. So a bunch of people who are going to see it now are going to see it because they're the kind of people who watch all the Oscar movies, I feel like.
Right.
So I feel like it was a crowd sort of meant for this kind of reaction.
Well, I got incredibly. We'll talk about some of the scenes that specifically that were like very moving, and I definitely teared up or at least cried. But my wife next to me, I mean, I felt so bad. She was a puddle the entire movie. I feel like I was like, and I appreciate that about her. Like I love that about her. But it was one of those movies where when I go with my wife, I'm like, and I knew going in it may feel like that. You get those cries in where you just like, you kind of like sob to the point where you're like, you feel better after the fact. You're like, you just feel relieved.
And that's what I wanted to say, because I do think this can be actually a turn off for some people hearing it. If they haven't seen the movie, they might be like, I don't know if I want to go through that experience. I don't know if I'm ready for something so sad. Right? Like the world's sad enough right now, which definitely is, so like some people might hear this and be like kind of turned off, but I think there is sadness, but it really is just an emotional movie in general. It's a moving movie. It's an emotional movie.
It helps you feel in touch with, I think, the fabric of the universe, like like people, humanity, everything. Yeah.
And then I think really the feeling for me that was so profound was a sense of catharsis for the shared grief we had all just sort of witnessed on screen, which brings up, I think, grief for people who've experienced it in their own lives, and I have. So I think it connects with that. You kind of bring your own stuff to the table, but you're also just seeing it on screen, beautifully portrayed, masterfully, acted and performed. Beautiful cinematography, incredible score. And all these things come together for this moment. It's really the catharsis, though, that I think unlocks it for me, where we've taken it from just being sad about it now, but we've given it some sort of meaning. We've found some sort of meaning, even if it's sort of numinous and like hard to define. Like I felt it in the end there, and I think that's what I reacted so strongly to it. That's a feeling that is hard to get, and I think is elusive at times, and yet can be some of the most rewarding experiences you can have, I think, watching a movie. So I would recommend people don't be turned off by the idea of this being a sad movie, because it is sad, but
it's not just sad too. Like it runs the gamut. It's got, and it really is like this historical fiction, which we talked about last week, and how if you're interested in the subject of Shakespeare, if you're interested in the subject of like a time capsule of that, if you like period dramas, which I do want to note too, like when I hear period drama some of the time, I'm thinking like medieval sort of thing, or they might think of something like,
but it's also like we're not seeing like knights and like
right.
other like things you might expect. It's a little bit later than that, but it's also kind of, it's like pre-Renaissance, so it's this interesting period. It's like 1500, I think, or 1400.
Right.
So, like, there was probably still some of that. We just don't see it because that's not what this movie's about. So that's pretty cool, too. Because, I would agree. If, like, you told me there was a movie set in, a certain time period, around, 1500 or whatever, England, I'm going to expect full suits of armor at some point.
Yeah, royalty.
Or, like, royalty. We're going to see, like, all this stuff, and we see very little of that.
Yeah, which I think is impactful. I think like seeing...
This is about everyday folks,
the story sets it up in that way. So I think if those are some of your interests, or if you're just in the mood for like, romances that spans like basically, someone's life or these circumstances. And the main thing is that like, it's not technically truthful. Like some of the stuff is imagined by Maggie O'Farrell.
It's
and
fictionalized,
so like, fictionalized. So
not necessarily not right, but she has like touchstones that she meets along the way, and this is in the book too, of like, we know this happened, and this happened, so we're going to touch all of these, but like how we got there and details about the characters and about the situations, a lot of that's being sort of invented by Maggie O'Farrell.
Which is really all the emotion though, right? Because like what we know are facts. We know like historical accounts and that sort of thing. So to imbue all of this with that emotion and everything that we're talking about here, I think is just like, it's so telling of storytelling and the power of storytelling, because because realistically, to someone like Shakespeare or Agnes, in this, like Anne Hathaway, that's how it feels to them, right? Like everything feels so large to you, and then like as history rolls on, we're just footnotes in some history book somewhere.
Yeah, we talked about this last week in the book. Like Maggie O'Farrell identified a spot in history where she felt like, Agnes was getting sort of overlooked. She was kind of relegated to being a footnote, and in fact, I heard her talk about this in an interview. Often people would say that like she trapped William Shakespeare in his marriage. He didn't love her. He was, and like there's very little evidence for any of this. It's just kind of been a thing that people say because they looked at him living in London and her living elsewhere and assumed that means that he doesn't love her. And she looked at that and was like, I don't know that that's true. And then like I think she really explored that.
Especially because like we talked about, like he would eventually at the end of his life go back to live with her and live out his days with his family, everything like that. So she was just saying it's not really fair. Like women have obviously...
She portrays him more as a man called to something, which, not a spoiler, but...
And like, women have been like relegated to that in just because of like the patriarchy for such a long time, and how like she was like, that's not really fair. Let's explore this from the perspective of like what these lives may have looked like.
Yeah. And I want to also touch on that for people, because we're still in the sort of non-spoiler section. You also might know that this is a movie about Shakespeare. And like, that is such a massive thing. Like, is this a biopic about Shakespeare? And we're just going to like talk about his son as like a key part of it. It's really not. Like, there's bits of that, but like, as we talked about in the book episode, like he's kind of like the third most important character. You could maybe say second most important in the movie, but he's not the most important. That's Agnes. She is the character. So if you are interested in seeing a movie that's about Shakespeare's wife, who's sort of been forgotten by history, and their relationship and their shared grief, that's more what this movie is. And I think hopefully that sounds more interesting to people, because I get being like, I don't know if I really care that much about a Shakespeare biopic, which this is not that.
Correct. And in the way that like a Shakespeare biopic might just like hit on like all the bullet points and the best parts of everything.
Yeah, they're going to show a ton of like his career, and like they don't get into hardly any of that.
This is early Shakespeare, and then it leads in, but it still does have like that through line of like legacy and like how something, because obviously like the correlation between Hamlet and Hamnet is told to us in the first line of the book and the movie. And so like that, like there is obviously the connective tissue there that Maggie O'Farrell was digging into. And then, Chloé Zhao and she continued here in the film. So let's talk about them. Let's talk about Chloé Zhao first. So Chloé Zhao is a Chinese filmmaker. She is known primarily for her work on independent films. Chloé Zhao is the second of 3 women to win the Academy Award for Best Director for Nomadland in 2020. Songs My Brother Taught Me in 2015, her debut film, premiered at Sundance Film Festival to critical acclaim and earned a nomination for the Independent Spirit Award for the Best First Feature. The Rider in 2017 was critically acclaimed and received nominations for the Independent Spirit Award for Best Film and Best Director. Zhao garnered international recognition with the American film Nomadland, which she wrote, produced, edited, and directed. Won numerous accolades, including the Golden Lion at Venice Film Festival, People's Choice at Toronto International Festival, which Hamnet also won. The People's Choice at TIFF, which is if you win that at TIFF, like you're almost guaranteed to be in like the Best Picture race, which Hamnet is currently.
Yeah.
Nomadland also earned 4 Academy Award nominations for the film, and Zhao won Best Picture and Best Director, becoming the first woman of color to win the latter. With this film here, Hamnet, 2025, it premiered at a 52nd Telluride Film Festival to critical acclaim. It currently has won the Golden Globe for Best Motion Picture Drama and is nominated for Academy Award for Best Picture, amongst other things.
Yeah, it has a good number of other nominations, right?
Jessie Buckley won the Golden Globe for Best Performance by a Female Actor in a Motion Picture Drama. And I'm going to be excited to see what else comes of that.
I have a rooting interest now in the Oscars more than I normally do. I've actually seen a few of them, so this is an interesting year.
It's a good year, yeah. We have some good ones to pick from. So to continue talking about Chloé Zhao, she was born Zhao Ting in Beijing, China. So that's her Chinese name. Her father, Zhao Yuji, was a successful executive at Shougang Group, one of the country's largest state-owned steel companies. According to her own description, Zhao was a curious child who was drawn to Western pop culture, especially in the realm of film and music. Zhao was uninterested in school in Beijing as she focused on art and her own pursuits instead. As a teenager, Zhao described herself as a, quote, rebellious and lazy student who was more interested in drawing manga-style comics and writing fan fiction than in academics. She was strongly influenced by the films of Wong Kar-wai, particularly Happy Together. During this period of her life, her parents divorced. Her father remarried a woman named Song Danan, who is a well-known Chinese actress who was in various sitcoms, mostly known for her appearance in Home with Kids. Although she was still learning English at the time, her parents sent her to Brighton College in 1998 at the age of 15. Zhao later moved to Los Angeles by herself in 2000, living in a Koreatown apartment and attending Los Angeles High School.
Wow.
Afterwards, she attended Mount Holyoke College, where she majored in politics and minored in film studies, graduating in 2005. Post-graduation, while bartending and working odd jobs, Zhao realized she enjoyed meeting people and hearing about their lives, giving her the push to attend film school. In 2010, she followed up on her undergraduate film minor by joining the Canbar Institute of Film and Television graduate film program at New York University's Tisch School of the Arts. While attending Tisch, Zhao studied under director Spike Lee. She told USA Today that she appreciated Lee not sugarcoating anything, saying that, quote, he will just tell you as it is, something she claims she needed.
What an incredible journey, and her moving over to live in LA when she's that young, kind of on her own. Like, it's amazing when people do that and are able to achieve the success that she's having.
We talked about Maggie O'Farrell last week, but I did want to again touch in because she wrote an article that I read that was really cool about her coming on board, and Chloé Zhao requested a meeting. So the film rights were actually purchased prior to publication, as tends to be the case these days, by London-based Liza Marshall and her company Hera Pictures, who then partnered with Neil Street Productions, and they were looking for a filmmaker. And so they started going through the process. They found Chloé Zhao. Chloé Zhao read the book, and it's interesting because I think Paul Mescal came on board at some point, and I read that at some sort of festival, they went for a walk together, Chloé Zhao and Paul Mescal, and he convinced her to read the book, and actually he was apparently we owe Paul Mescal for Chloé Zhao coming to this film. He convinced her to read the book, and actually because he I think wanted to be a part of it.
That's cool.
Anyway, to fast forward, Chloé Zhao is on board. she requests a meeting with Maggie O'Farrell. Maggie O'Farrell says, okay, sure. And Maggie had heard that there was a possibility of being asked to like co-write the screenplay in some way. And she just knew, in this article, it's really funny. We'll link it in the show notes. She knew she was going to say no, right? Like she was like, there's no way I'm going to say yes to this. I don't want to do this. I have other things that I'm working on, other things that I want to do. And she says that like by the end, she doesn't know exactly how she got to it, and she couldn't believe it. But as she closed her laptop, she had just agreed to like lead the screenplay, like write the screenplay, basically the first draft on her own, and then they would interplay it back and forth. So she was like, Chloé Zhao is a very persuasive person and like very passionate about it, and she wasn't necessarily what she expected to. And of course Maggie O'Farrell says that she didn't regret it in any way. And there was this interesting way that they were on different time zones, and they would just be sending voice memos, and she said that Chloé Zhao is like the queen of voice memos, and will leave multiple 5-minute voice memos, but then also sometimes they would stack up and there would be like 10 when she would wake up and see them. And then she said the longest of them was like 58-minute voice memo.
Wow.
And so they're leaving voice memos for each other to like kind of make edits back and forth and get ideas and questions from each other. And,
there's I don't know if you have how much you've been exposed to this. There's kind of a new trend of doing this, where people do like voice memos instead of like texting sometimes, because it's similar to a text in that it's just like you can kind of get out your thoughts without having to go back and forth. But then you just send them to each other, and it's also like I think indicative of our maybe our generation is maybe to blame for this, but then I think it trickles down to the younger generations not wanting to talk on the phone.
Yeah.
Like, I don't want to talk on the phone, but I'm going to send you a voice memo with a thought I've had.
Well, because it's so much easier than having to type up everything and to get your thoughts out. It's so much slower to type it all out versus just saying it.
Well, I think we've started to realize, and so my wife does this quite a bit with her friends, and it's something I noticed, and I started asking her about, because it's not something that like me and my friends do a lot. And I was like, it's interesting you guys send each other like voice memos a lot. I don't even know if that's what they would call them, but they're like little recordings where they just like have thoughts.
Voice messages.
Yeah, voice messages of some kind. And one of the things she says that they like about them is that in text, I think we've all become very aware that there's a lot of like ambiguity in meaning sometimes. And like you're reading into punctuation and you're like, oh, if someone doesn't put an exclamation mark, are they mad? Oh, if they put a period, does that mean they're pissed at me? Because like there's all these like interesting holdovers from like the AIM like space where you were doing a lot of this instant messaging. Especially I think millennials are always like worried about like coming off like they're mad when they're not, or being dicks. And like when you do the voice, I think it eliminates a lot of that mystery, and you can hear the delivery and understand like the way in which something
personable
is
too, right? It's more personal. Like I feel like you're actually getting to talk to somebody, but you don't have the commitment of being on the phone, like you said. So yeah, it's really cool, and I liked hearing that for that worked for them.
It's cool to hear that worked for them. I'm always so curious about working relationships like that, where you're co-writing something. I know I was like picking Fonda's brain a little bit about it. The couple times I've got to talk to her about co-writing. Was it Breath of the Dragon? Is that the name of it?
Yeah.
With
Shannon Lee.
Shannon Lee. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's just so fascinating to me, the idea of like coming together with someone who, like a Chloé Zhao, where you're like, clearly she's gonna have very strong opinions about this, and I'm the one who wrote this book, and like we're gonna have to find a way to compromise, and you got to get a right vibe from somebody, and clearly they were able to get that and feel like they could work together. And so I think that this, I know that this has been nominated for Best Adapted Screenplay, and I think that this should be a strong contender. We'll just say, I know we haven't gotten to sort of our votes at the end, but like when we're talking about some of the best things that adaptations can do, which is one of the things we talk about a lot on this podcast, I think this film is one of those examples.
A couple other people I wanted to talk about too. Luke Zhao was the cinematographer for Hamnet here.
We haven't even touched on the cinematography yet for this movie. Be absolutely incredible. Looks so good.
Gorgeous. Yes.
I was thinking a lot about like color in film. I recently had a birthday where someone got me a book about like it's like kind of those like coffee table books, but it has a bunch of like
love those, dude. I love a good
color
coffee
of
table
film
book.
kind of books,
Yes. Yes.
And I was also like watching, I don't know, I get into like film tube. I start watching film, YouTube things, and talking about like certain principles where you want to like have like 3 main colors in a scene, and like not crowd the frame with like too many different colors, and like different things like that. And I'm like, this is cool. It's like things that you see it and you're like, oh yeah, that makes sense. They show you like a difference between a scene where you do that and a scene where it's more muddled and you have all these different colors. And I don't know. It's really cool to see that.
It's intentional. It evokes emotion.
Yeah, and it draws your eye to certain spaces. Like, if you have like one thing that's a different color than everything else, like it'll draw your eye to it, and like
color contrast is big too, to like get things to pop.
Vince Gilligan is a master of this, by the way.
Yeah,
I think it was a film. It was an essay about like Pluribus and like Vince Gilligan in general, perhaps. But I was thinking about that while I'm watching this movie and how like the red of Agnes's dress amidst all these like luscious greens, but then also sort of these drab grays and tans of like the buildings and the even like the shirts that other characters would wear, and how that would like draw the eye to her. And just so many different moments like that where like, the frame within a frame, that is a thing you hear about, right? Where they're like standing in a door frame within the frame of the scene you're looking at, and you got the sun behind them, and just gorgeous moments. Very kind of slow and quiet, but I think that's so appropriate for the subject matter at hand.
And we mentioned like Elemental for Buckley's performance, but also I want to say like the cinematography, the film, the way that like nature, the sound design of that forest, and like all like how
score by Max Richter.
Yeah, who we've talked about many times at this point, especially because of the very famous On the Nature of Daylight, which is, I think this is the third or fourth time it's appeared on our podcast.
Do we want to talk about this now? Because I don't know if this is a spoiler. I've thought about this
I'll just say that he was the composer, so we needed to talk about it. That song appears, and we'll talk about it a little more. Just again to talk about Lucas Zhao. He also, interestingly, was the cinematographer for I'm Thinking of Ending Things, the Charlie Kaufman film that we talked about. That
another incredible
Jessie Buckley was
film,
in.
so that's so cool.
Yeah. He also did The Zone of Interest more recently, which was like got a bunch of nominations and stuff, and it was a really, powerful film.
Didn't see that, but I've heard good things.
And then I wanted to talk about like the costume design in the film, because this isn't like a costume drama, which was kind of maybe a term that I should have used earlier when we were talking about that sort of like, the sort of silhouettes of like the large gowns and all this other stuff. And apparently like the costume designer Malgosia Terzanska was trying to intentionally have the clothes maybe not be so period specific. And I think that's something that Zhao approached as the film as a whole, is like, it doesn't have to be 100% historically accurate visually, and because the story isn't either, right? Like, it's historical fiction. There's fiction. Like there's a lot of like meaning that's baked into it, but also like the context of this is, most of it's true, some of it is just like to forward the story. Does it make sense for the story, and have that be the master? I think that's usually the safest way to play things. And
there is a journey I noticed with Agnes's dress and her appearance, where especially in her moments of grief later in the film, where the colors have become muted. She's now wearing like a fraying, almost looking vest over top of this red dress she used to wear. It's unclear whether or not it's the same one. The colors of it seem faded. And I was just like thinking how astute that was to sort of visually signify, and maybe the something with the saturation is happening as well. I don't know, but where you can convey that grief by this character who used to be so vibrant, and seeing where she's at now, it's really powerful.
Yeah, and the color just being kind of pulled out of the world in that way.
Yeah.
It's definitely a good thing to know. And I also just like the tactile nature of this film. Like, there's dirt on everybody's fingers. Like, there's just like,
Agnes's especially, which is like you wouldn't expect for the time, but she was like the real person was sort of like a farm, born on a farm kind of woman, that would have been not uncommon for her to be getting her hands dirty. But
just generally seeing the way that people are interacting with the world, and how that feels so grounded, and something that we as an audience see and can feel the sensation ourselves, and all of that like is built into this film.
There's another thing I'll link in the show notes that I watched, but I think it was like a Vanity Fair notes on a scene. Those things they do where they're like drawing on the tablets.
Did Zhao do one?
Zhao and Paul Mescal and
Jessie Buckley.
Jessie Buckley. I keep wanting to call her Maggie O'Farrell, but that's the author. Jessie Buckley. All did one together. And there's a lot of cool moments in that is very interesting. Then I'll probably reference some more of them later. But one of the moments that made me think of, I think it was Paul Mescal was pointing out that the set design was so good and so complete, that he felt like it actually helped him to have the freedom to walk around and embody the space, and he said like he didn't have to worry that he would get to a part of the set that wasn't prepared.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden the illusion breaks and it's like, oh, no, don't go over there. That part's not like, that part doesn't look right. It's like he felt like he could go anywhere, he could interact with anything, and it would all work. And from them talking about it, there was a ton of improvisation that was even happening in these scenes. And I'm going to talk about this on one particular moment later when we get to spoilers. But because I was astounded to hear that this moment, because it was one of my favorite moments in the movie, was improvised. We'll get
That's
to it.
cool, yeah. I think she really wants that collaboration. You can see it in her back and forth with Maggie O'Farrell developing the script. But then I think from what I've seen in my research is like a lot of the performances and the things going in here, Paul Mescal basically like in some way creatively led the troupe of actors that would go on to do some of the performances near the end of the film. Like, so he had a creative force in kind of some of that world, while and just having that level of collaboration and that level of trust in the artists around you, and like the way that just feels so, it feels like a theater troupe in a lot of ways, like the way that you're developing and creating, and it is like a fully collaborative, and it's like she feels like such an auteur filmmaker, and she's constantly talking about how it's her style, if anything, is like this collaboration, this collaborative effort to push, which all films are, but like this sounds uniquely like something that you can see in her work. Okay, so let's get into the plot here.
Yeah, so we're gonna get into spoilers now.
Yes.
If it's not clear, we recommend you see this movie. All right.
Yes, check out the movie. A written prologue states that in Stratford, England, Hamnet and Hamlet were considered the same name. William Shakespeare works as a tutor to help pay his family's debt. He leaves his students after seeing Agnes Hathoway practicing falconry, and they share a moment before he leaves. William's mother, Mary, tells him that rumors persist of Agnes being the daughter of a forest witch. William visits Agnes in the forest, where she asks him for a story. He recounts the legend of Orpheus and Eurydice, delighting her. Agnes predicts William's future by holding his hand at the base of his thumb, foretelling a successful future for him and 2 children at her deathbed. The pair consummate their relationship, impregnating Agnes, leading her family to disown her, and forcing her to move in with William. The pair marry, and Agnes gives birth to Susanna in the woods. William fights back when his father John beats him for rejecting manual labor. Seeing William's frustration with writing, Agnes suggests to her brother Bartholomew to send him to London for a theatrical career, leaving her and Susanna in Stratford. A while later, a pregnant Agnes tries to go outside to give birth, but William's family restrains her in the house while she gives birth to twins Hamnet and Judith, the latter appearing stillborn. Remembering the death of her mother, Agnes demands to hold the baby despite superstition, and Judith awakens. William, now successful, returns intermittently, and the children grow up very close. Agnes foretells Hamnet, who wishes to join his father's theater company, will flourish. Agnes's hawk dies and is buried. She tells the children to make a wish to the hawk spirit, who she says will carry them in its heart.
We were talking about cinematography, and I think there's an incredible moment when we first see Agnes, and she's in the woods, and she's curled up beside this sort of cavernous opening, this dark opening that we return to several times especially early on in this movie. And it looks like there's a root that she's laying against, and it almost looks like it's cradling her. I thought this is such a cool way to show her connection to nature, how comfortable she is with it. And also, like, she's so near the unknown and the dangerous, and yet she seems comfortable there. And I don't know, that just says something to me about a familiarity with how unforgiving and uncaring nature can sometimes feel. And yet this is a character who is so connected with it. And she seems to have this supernatural, almost like witch power. I would say this is something that's a little more played up in the book. I think overall this is actually a little subtler in the movie. But still it's present, right? We see it come up time and again. So there's this moment of intrigue with her, and then I think it's notable that Shakespeare is not named. He is referred to as Will, I think, a few times. They call him by Will. They don't say William Shakespeare until like the very end of the movie.
Right.
And so I think if you go into this movie not having read the book and maybe knowing nothing about it, you probably don't know this is Shakespeare for a while. You might start having some suspicions at some point, but like they don't really like tip their hand. So if
it's called Hamnet, and they do say at the very beginning, like Hamnet and Hamlet mean the same thing in Stratford, England. Like,
but
that's like,
when you see Paul Mescal, do you know that that's Shakespeare? I don't know.
Yeah. He's got the earring.
Again, if you've seen the trailer, you know anything about it, you might. But like, I don't know. It'd be interesting to talk to somebody who had that, like, the pure experience of knowing nothing about the movie to watch it. And
if you go in completely blind and you're not very familiar with Shakespeare's work and sort of like
that
legacy,
he had a son named Hamnet. I don't think a lot of people know that. Anyway, I just think it's a clever way to go about it.
Yeah, I wanted to talk about the nature stuff as well. Just we've already talked about it to an extent where it's like it's this unknowable thing, but like that it's like this whole is like breathing, and it's so like it feels ominous, and it feels so unknowable, and it feels powerful, and so all of that is like being evoked, like you said, by her sort of being in touch with that.
It could be like the force of death, because death is such an essential part of the natural world. Maybe that's like death calling to them. I think it's notable that after the birth of Susanna, there's a moment where William is holding her, and he looks into the cave, and he looks like kind of scared, and it almost looks like he's having this reaction to something we can't see.
Well, it's the unknown too. Like now he has to protect this child from the unknown.
It's notable that she, for that first birth, and this happens in the book as well, just goes out into the woods to give birth. And notable in the movie that she's right by that cave. That's like her spot.
Well, and again, that is the epitome of like elemental too. Like it's like making crazy noises. She's like screaming at the top of her lungs, and she's going through all this pain. And yet like her being there, it's a comfort to her being there. Like that's home for her, and that is safe.
Well, again, she was being cradled by that root, right? Like there's something natural about it. Yeah,
it's her mother in a sense too. Like she was of the forest, and like that essence is like her mother's remaining there with her in some ways. And
and we talk about the more difficult birth of the twins that occurs later, and the rational person in me is like, yeah, you should probably give birth, around other people at the very least who can help you, especially when you're going to have a complicated birth of twins. Which is something she had no idea she was pregnant with twins, and that's sort of a reveal about I'm supposed to have two kids. I didn't know there was going to be a third, and then it appears that one has died as a stillbirth. But then also there's a moment where she thinks that she misread the moment, and she's actually surrounded by two people who aren't her children. She thinks I'm surrounded by you two when I die. She thinks she's going to die. Really powerful sequence, but I think you can also read this as maybe the movie saying, like, if she had made it out into the woods, would she have been better off? I don't know. Open question. I think the rational person in me is like, no, but like, this is someone who is so at one with nature. Maybe she would have been fine. I don't know.
Well, it seemed like it was all bad. Like there was a storm with that flood coming through the door. It seemed like scary and bad.
Yeah. Well, and that's why they're like, you can't go out there where it's flooding. And then like, the water coming into the house, such a cool moment. It also sort of evokes like the water breaking for a pregnancy, and like something being wrong, and like
a natural thing that you can't hold back. Like it's coming in, it's like this is like the world coming at you, and there's nothing you can do to stop it. And like that's
she looks over at it while she's giving birth, and it's like coming into the room. Like that would be terrifying, especially back in the day like that, where you're like, is this going to destroy our house? Like I don't know.
I love that like she falls in love with Shakespeare after the story, kind of like that is their full connection, and like the way that storytelling is like inherent to their relationship in a sense.
Yeah, I think that was completely added, the Eurydice and Orpheus story, which by the way does mirror their own journey, because Orpheus was a poet and artist. Eurydice was not only the woman he falls in love with and then loses to death, and he has to go through this ordeal. It's in the movie where he goes down and has to make a deal to to lead her out, but he's not allowed to look back at her. And then he ends up looking back at her at one point, and then she's sort of lost to him. But what he goes on to do after that is change the world through his art and like his songs and his poems that he was inspired by her to make. So it's a tragic story of loss, and yet it's also one about using that experience to create world-changing art, which is what Shakespeare does.
It's an unfortunate sort of realistic depiction of like things that move us, that shake us to our core, that leave us vulnerable, that leave us in like these are things that people find areas to be creative in. They find ways to express themselves, to work through these kinds of things, and then in that way they create something that connects universally. That connects to other people, and that helps them through the similar grieves or like ordeals and things, tribulations that people go through in their lives. And in that way, it helps you feel less alone in the world. And I think obviously like that being that sort of like legend that he's recounting to her, and then eventually that mirroring they're possibly mirroring their story.
A couple other standout performances and interesting changes. One of them comes from Emily Watson, who plays Mary Shakespeare, as I'm looking at the cast here. That is William's mother, who at first seems like she is going to be kind of a villainous character, much like his father definitely is. That shithead, who I hate from the book still quite a bit. Also bad in the movie, but doesn't do the main thing that I really hate him for, which he does in the book, which is strike Hamnet. That doesn't happen. We don't see it happen in the movie, which is an interesting omission we can talk about. But Mary also seems like she might be kind of villainous because she does not like, and she's not welcoming of Agnes when they first come to her. And I love to see the journey this character goes on of so resistant to being so understanding and loving, I would say, and caring. She bonds with her over the children and her own loss, because she lost a child to the plague, and how much that connects her with Agnes in that moment. We haven't gotten there yet, but like you can just see this like hangover of grief, and like she's doing this incredible acting performance, even though she's not a main character in this movie. I thought she was really good. I had seen her in some stuff, around where she's a really brilliant performer. So I just want to shout her out. I don't think she's probably not a big enough role to like get any sort of awards recognition, but I thought she was really good in this movie.
Well, and you're touching on something with this like maternal sort of look, because it's very like Agnes's mother and her mother's death is very important.
Oh, speaking of Chernobyl, she's in Chernobyl. She's the scientist. She's like the main woman scientist. That's her.
Nice. So that's so ingrained in Agnes' character, like the passing of her mother, what she means to her, and then she as a mother towards these children that we're seeing, and then Shakespeare's mother, like and like how all the story is like really framing it in that way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the connection of motherhood, and although the stepmother is still kind of a shit.
Yeah, but she doesn't have the direct connection to some of these characters.
And she even tells her like later on, "You never cared about me, so fuck you."
Yeah, well, you're never my mother. She tells her, yeah. And the way that like she is thinking about her mother's death as Judith is coming into the world, and how like she's like almost willing this child back to life, and like the way that comes to play a part later with the stuff that happens with Hamnet too, how like that it's like mirroring the mother's, where she wasn't allowed to see like her mother on her deathbed, and that was like impactful for her. And then eventually with Hamnet,
when she lets her daughter back in the room. But also like it's these moments where she pushes back against tradition and superstition in a way, which is really interesting, because it's like she just has a good eye for, I guess, for like identifying superstition that has value and that what doesn't. Because I absolutely think that this was probably true, that if a child came out and seemed like they weren't going to make it, get them out of there immediately. Don't show them to the mother. Like, that's bad luck, like. And she's like, no, bring her over here. And like there is like actual science around skin to skin contact and how important that can be, and it can actually be important in this kind of a moment. So she kind of like accidentally does something right, and that's just kind of it's kind of funny how it works, but she intuits it. It's like she just kind of naturally knows that this is something that I should do.
Got instincts for it, and that's to some of that supernatural stuff. One thing I wanted to note that was very, very cool that in my research is this like 9 herbs charm. They use this old poem. A snake came crawling, it bit a man. Then Woden took 9 glory twigs, smote the serpent so that it flew into 9 parts. Their apple brought this pass against poison, that she nevermore would enter her house. So like I think some of like the muttering and like the stuff that they're talking about as they're mixing these sort of like alchemical or whatever, like the not alchemy, but like I don't know, herbology or something. Like they're creating these like potions or something.
Yeah, it almost seems like pagan salves or something that. Yeah,
and that's exactly what it is. It's like apparently it was scholars have proposed that this passage describes Woden coming to the assistance of the herbs through his use of 9 twigs, each twig inscribed with the runic first letter initial of a plant. The poem contains one of 2 clear mentions of the god Woden in Old English poetry. The other is maxims, and apparently like scholars say that it was clearly an old heathen thing which has been subjected to Christian censorship. So it's like, it's the kind of thing that barely slipped through history for us to like see it.
Yeah.
And for them to like use that and evoke that in the story to like, for that to be like an actual kind of like spell or charm that's then used for Agnes's character. So cool. I just had to note that.
So cool, man. I have like 3 things I want to talk about right now. I'm going to try and get to them all real quick.
Go for it.
First off, Jacobe Juppe, I want to say is the name, who plays Hamnet, is incredible, and so are all the child actors. But the reason I particularly note him is, do you know the interesting fact about him and his family?
His brother, yeah.
His brother,
I do, yeah.
His brother apparently plays the actor who performs as Hamlet in the later play, which we haven't gotten to yet. But I just thought that was a really cool fact. I want to get that out there. Both incredible, especially for how young he is. That was 1. 2 was the way this movie connects. It's kind of touching on what you're touching on. The idea of like a pagan belief and a connection to nature it somehow makes it feel as if it is like a deeply humanist position. It's like deeply human and yet divine and spiritual.
Totally.
In a way that is sort of akin to a religious belief, but also feels a part of it. Like a part, not a part, from it. It's such an interesting dynamic that they create, where I can really appreciate and sort of cheer for the spiritual elements of this movie because of that. Like, it feels like wrong, right? It's like persecuted. It's a couple times where it's like, don't ever say that to anybody because they won't like to hear that. That
it's not stuff. Organized religion, right? It's something that feels like it like sort of manifested organically through just human to human contact at a certain point, and it's not this like larger entity that's like sort of like,
yeah, you don't have all the baggage of the Christian church.
Right, like they talk about in the book how like John Shakespeare, like, he's getting fines for not going to church.
Yeah.
And like so that kind of like those mandates, and even in this film,
the church was so powerful at this point in history.
And even in this film, Agnes, like somebody confronts her with something about like Christianity, and she's like, I told myself long ago I would go to your churches, but I wouldn't believe.
And I don't think that was in the book, but that was a powerful moment I really liked. Yeah. I think really, like, Chloé Zhao really wanted to highlight that. Like, this is older than Christianity. Like, her beliefs are tied to something, like, fundamental. It's just really cool. Like, it's just fun. Like, I don't necessarily believe in it, but, like, for a piece of fiction, I can suspend that disbelief. And, like, if I was going to believe in something, it would be this more, like, unknowable energy, perhaps, I think. That, like, isn't so codified, and people aren't trying to put it in all these boxes and make all these rules about it, and just like, this is something that is so tied to the earth and nature that it's kind of hard to argue against. Like, it seems to be present. I really love the way they do that. And then the third thing, and I think this ties back into that, is the hawk moment where the hawk dies. So the hawk is present in the book. The hawk doesn't die in the book. I mean, maybe it does, but like, we don't hear about it. It goes to live with somebody else. Like, there's like another person that she like gives it to at one point. And that's the last we hear of the hawk, which is a cool thing early on in the book. But like, I love that Chloé Zhao like brings that back and makes it a central kind of metaphor or symbol for what's going to happen later on in the story. And we have this moment where there's a funeral. The entire family is present. All 3 kids, William and Agnes, are there. And they do a funeral for the hawk who has died. And they have this, she has this moment where she says, the spirit of the hawk is going to carry our dreams, I think, into the afterworld or into another world. And, she's like, can you see it? And she like does the thing where she kind of points up, and they say they can see it, right? Even though like we assume they can't, but we're like, maybe they can see its spirit. And that's kind of the implication. This will become relevant again later, but I just wanted to say that I thought that was a beautiful scene where we also see them establishing their familiarity with death, and we see that Agnes is a character who seems to be equipped to have to deal with the grief of death.
Yeah.
Which makes what happens to her and her reaction to it even more powerful, I think, because this is a character who seems quite strong and seems quite equipped for this.
Well, and because it's such a natural, again, we're talking about nature.
Yeah.
And death is such a natural cycle of life. And how, like, those things, like, to find a way, again, not through an organized religion, but through something that feels more like individual and like spiritual.
Hawk spirits, that's not something that's in Christianity, I can tell you that much.
Yeah. And so, like, you're dealing with the death of a loved one in this bird, and the way that she, like, picks up the leaves and she blows them out and stuff, and it all feels like
they're back beside that cavern again. Once, by the way, like that's where they keep returning to.
It feels like it's making a lot of commentary on, like, this idea of, like, death being an organic part of all of this, and how, like, death, like, in, like, legacy and, like, your memories, and like this hawk is going to live on through them, and they're going to live on through the hawk, is basically what she's saying. Like, it'll live on in our dreams, and I think there's a lot going into where we get to with Hamnet, and like where we're
let's
going.
Get to that, the arrival of death into this story.
All right, so let's get to this last bit of plot summary, and then we can wrap up. Returning to London, William wanders through the streets during an outbreak of the bubonic plague. In Stratford, Judith contracts the plague, but Hamnet evokes the tale of the hawk to encourage her. Later, Hamnet lies beside her, proclaiming he wants to take her place. Judith recovers, but Hamnet falls gravely ill and dies. On his deathbed, he envisions himself on a stage calling for his mother, and Agnes's hawk appears. William rushes home and is distraught to find Hamnet lying in repose. His absence strains his marriage to Agnes as they cope with Hamnet's death. William buys the largest house in Stratford and departs for London again. Agnes holds his hand and says she now sees nothing. William rehearses Hamlet in London, but is frustrated with his cast for not showing passion. In despair, he leans over the edge of a jetty on the River Thames and recites his to be or not to be speech from the play. Agnes's stepmother, Joan, shows her a playbill for a production of Hamlet in London and upbraids her for marrying William, but Agnes rebukes her. Agnes and Bartholomew travel to London to see William. Finding him absent from his home, they resolve to attend the first performance of Hamlet at the Globe Theatre. Agnes is initially offended at her son's name being profaned. Upon seeing William in the role of the ghost of Hamlet's father, she realizes that the play is a tribute to Hamnet and is moved to tears by the scene between Hamlet and his father. Backstage, William, having noticed Agnes, breaks down in tears while listening to the play and returns to see her from the wings. The play progresses through scenes of sword fighting, fulfilling Hamnet's dream for an action role. During the scene when Hamlet dies, Agnes reaches forward to hold the actor's hand at the base of the thumb, and the rest of the audience reaches out towards him in turn. She envisions Hamnet on the stage, seen earlier as his dying vision, now moving from sadness to a smile, and disappears into the theater. For the first time since Hamnet's death, Agnes laughs and smiles.
Yeah, so much to say about this final scene, so I want to wait a moment to get to it, because I don't want to skip over the death sequence and what happens with Hamnet when he sort of takes the place. Because this was a moment in the book that I remember thinking, like, how are they going to do this? This is one of those where you're going to have to make some decisions as a filmmaker. What are you going to show? And how are you going to convey this moment that feels surreal in the book when it happens? And we're not really sure how much of this is happening versus just in the head of Hamnet, and who knows? What did you think? I'll just kind of open it up for you. What did you think of how they portrayed this?
It's one of my favorite parts of the book. There's just the beats along the way where, like, they are accustomed, or at least aware of, the sort of supernatural, like, kind of grasp on the world that they have, their family has, their mom has, and the way that they're taught about it. And I love the way that he makes this, like, selfless, and it's like brings tears to my eyes just thinking about it. Like this idea of a child making this selfless decision to save his sister, and then the way that the cinematography
set up, by the way, with the twin swapping stuff earlier on in the movie. They did a really good job setting that up.
All the acting stuff and the sort of costuming and like all of that works so well. Like them all playing the witches,
which made me think of Macbeth and
Macbeth, totally, yeah. And then they like run up and surround Agnes, and it's just a moment of joy, and it's so cool. Like that to have, you got to have that in the film to then sell all of this other stuff. But specifically with the death scene, you were talking about, like, how do they convey it? I thought so poignant and powerful to have the POV, be the POV of death. The camera up high behind them, and he's told Judith to turn away from death.
I think he says from it. He says turn away from it. He doesn't call it death, and it's just implied. Or even just like, we're like, what is it?
So she turns away and he's looking at us, the audience, and he looks so scared. And yet he's still like saying, I'm going to face this bravely like his dad told him to. Like that, like it's so powerful.
So there's a couple of moments where I told you I got teared up. One of the initial ones we've already been through, and that was actually the marriage. Because I think I was moved by just how beautifully it was shot, but her, asking him to look back at her and it working. And like that was one where I was like anticipating, like it was one of those, like I was getting teared up because I was anticipating what was going to happen, and I was already feeling the connection to these characters. And then during this death sequence is another moment. And I almost want to call it like 2 or 3 moments, because I feel like there was a couple points along the way where I kept getting teary eyed, and part of it was that
when she's holding Hamnet as he dies, unbelievably,
and her performance is, when we're talking about that raw. She's unafraid to show what one of the biggest emotions you can feel as a person, the death of your child, and feeling like and it's clear that she feels like she's failed in this moment. Like she's like, I should have been able to save him and I couldn't. It's just so raw. And the way that Jessie Buckley is not afraid, I think, to let the ugliness of that emotion lead in this scene.
Yeah,
I think we have gotten into an era where, unfortunately, there's been a lot of a movement towards subdued emotion from a lot of people.
And perfectionism, for
like
sure.
wanting to look perfect while you're in, and like this is such the opposite of that, of just leaning into the natural way the human face looks in a moment like this. And it's such an intense close-up. Like, there's just a lot of confidence you have to have as a performer to be able to pull something like this off and to know that it's going to work.
Even as it's like the largest emotion that you can possibly feel, we all are kind of like seeing that as, I think people connect with that when they've gone through something like that too. Like, we are all kind of putting ourselves in those shoes, and she pulls it off in such a way that like it doesn't feel like overacting. It doesn't feel like it's a massively difficult performance to give.
That gets back to my very first point about how this stuff's all earned. Like
it's not like melodramatic.
It's
like
not.
it's like this is it rings so true. And that I just thought that scene was powerful as well. 2 things with Paul Mescal that I want to talk about. When he shows up at the death scene, it's devastating. And his joy for Judith still being alive, and that's like,
and then
to his just like utter terror or just like grief immediately. And then also like him being frustrated during this acting of Hamlet. Where they're rehearsing it, and like him actually saying, no, you're not doing it right. It's like this, and him showing in that performance, in that moment, like, this is all the grief. This is what you need to bring to this role for it to be realistic. And like the way that Paul Mescal, I want to shout him out as that particular part of his performance I found to be like amazing, because it's playing a role within a role, and it's like showing someone else how to do it and deliver the lines. And it's like an extended monologue that I thought he delivered brilliantly.
Yeah, such a cool moment. It's the first time we meet the actor who's going to play Hamlet, and he's not quite getting it right. I believe that's him. That was something like later on my wife was like, oh, I thought that was somebody different. And so I'm not 100% sure, but I thought this was the same guy, but maybe I'm wrong. Maybe he gets replaced, and this is the new guy. But I thought it was the same guy. I mean, maybe he didn't have the blonde hair yet, and that might be why we're thinking it's somebody different. Yeah, I love this moment because it also, to me, makes me think about how, and I think there's a Kurt Vonnegut quote about this, about like, when he's writing, he feels like he's blind and deaf and, and can't speak and can't hear, and I think he's like writing with a crayon held in his lips or something like that. And like, that's how it feels sometimes, where it's like you have something you're trying to get across, and yet you're like, I can't get it right. I can't convey the thing that I want to convey. And I think for that made me think of this moment, because he's hearing these lines he's written, and he's like, again, right? And it's because there's something very specific that he is trying to convey there, and it shows the journey, as we're talking even more meta, of like an actor who has to now try and find that thing. Like they're trying to find a version, at least, of that thing that is meant by the creator, who's standing right there, and like that's gotta be so hard. And like you feel for the actor in the moment too, but then when he says it, you can hear the difference, and you're like, yeah, there is a difference. Like, you need to tap into this, and I don't know, it's a really cool moment, and then this comes out again later when he does the to be or not to be sequence, which is probably the most iconic soliloquy in all of literature.
Gotta be. Gotta be.
And to me, it always makes me think of, so Camus wrote a book called The Myth of Sisyphus, and he's kind of a philosopher, kind of an author. I mean, he is an author, but he's kind of considered a philosopher, an existentialist thinker at the very least. And early on in that book, it might even be the way it opens, there's this quote I always really liked, and it makes me think of this to be or not to be, because I think there's a lot of similarities here. There is but one truly serious philosophical problem, and that is suicide. Judging whether life is or is not worth living amounts to answering the fundamental question of philosophy. All the rest, whether or not the world has 3 dimensions, whether the mind has 9 or 12 categories, comes afterward. These are games one must first answer. And that's what that whole book's about. It's about trying to find meaning in life, and it's a provocative question. Like, the fundamental question of philosophy is whether or not we should kill ourselves. Is life worth living? But that's what the to be or not to be speech is about, right? Yeah. It's like, I've suffered all of this. I'm going to continue to suffer. Is it worth living, or should I kill myself? That's what this whole thing's about. And it's such a powerful moment where he's standing on the edge of this, on the river, probably the River Thames, I would imagine. And he says it in a way that, like, I've heard this speech a bunch of times delivered by a bunch of different people, but I thought was especially effective. It's such a hard moment to nail because, again, most iconic, soliloquy ever, and you're trying to do it in a new way, kind of. But I thought it worked. I thought it was really good. Yeah, it worked.
It was like a moment where I was like, oh, is he really about to like stand over and contemplate suicide and say it as if I just was like, is this the moment of inspiration where he puts that line in the play now?
Yeah, unclear whether or not he's already written this line and now he's saying it, or if it's.
I like it better if he's already written it.
I think so too. I think this is something he's been thinking about, and maybe even just previous to this scene, he might have been thinking about it. And then, like, now he's out here and now he's saying it because it's something that is, just in his mind.
But it is incredibly, like, just, it's always, there's a reason that it's the most iconic thing, like, basically in the English language.
Yeah.
And it's cool that, like, they get to shout it out and actually have more Shakespeare and specifically more Hamlet in the movie than was even in the original source material of the book.
Agreed. Yeah, and that was one of the things I asked for, or kind of wanted, was a few more connections like that, and we get a few more of it.
Speaking of things from the book that we see in the film or don't see in the film, I was happy that the chapter of the plague going from monkey to person to the ship and brought over, like, of course it wasn't connected in the same ways, but there was at least like the homage to that part of the book.
So through a shadow puppetry moment, which was just a cool, like, practical moment of artistry, but also it tells the story. And, like, we have no idea what this means in the movie, right? If you haven't seen this, you're like, whereas in the book, like, this is the story of how we follow it essentially getting there. But, like, he just sees it, and he, like, you can tell he's like scared by it, right? This is
well, the plague is all you can infer, obviously the plague is all around him, and then he walks into town and
he sees the plague doctors, which I thought was just cool to see them out in the wild. Like, he sees them in London. It's different. Like, in the book, they come to their house, or one does, whereas here he sees it in London, and it also makes it, like, scarier, like, but it almost creates even more of a dramatic surprise of it arriving at the house, because it feels like the house is safe. And he's in London, which is scary and has a disease and scary things all around, right? It's dark and dingy and, like, kind of filthy, and you're just like, oh, he's off in London. So it feels like it's like more of a danger where he's at. But then it comes to them. I love the moment where she's like, there's something wrong with the bees. You know, they're like they're behaving strangely, and it's like she's just picking up on there's something in the air. There's just something wrong, right? And that's, I think the moment where she ends up coming home and finding out that her daughter has contracted it, which, by the way, her daughter contracts it, and then Hamnet is able to sort of take her place. Maybe he just, like, becomes infected himself, but I think the story would have you believe that instead he's actually taking her place and kind of, like, taking it from her.
Well, and that's the interesting thing is, like, you can take it for the supernatural, but there's enough, like, sort of ambiguity there that, like, maybe her medicines and salves worked and Hamnet actually doomed himself by getting in the bed rather than transferring it over. And that's, like, some of the tragedy of that in there as well.
I don't think the story supports that, but I think it's enough there to where you kind of get plausible deniability about the supernatural elements. which is cool.
I like to think, I like that it kind of puts his finger on the scale of like the supernatural, because I think that it makes for more interesting storytelling.
All right, I remembered the one other scene I really want to talk about because it was in that breakdown of a scene. So this is a moment I talked about with my wife later. I was like, one of my favorite moments from the movie is they're arguing. It's after Hamnet has died. And like I've talked about, like she's wearing, like her clothes have gotten desaturated in color. She's got that vest on. She's peeling eggs at the table, and he walks up behind her and he's like talking to her, and there's all this distance between them. And then he's like, "I have to leave. I'll send word." And she's like, "You'll send word? I'm right here. What are you talking about?" And they're just like miscommunicating. They're so angry. And she's like, "Of course you're gonna leave. Like you've been gone all along. You weren't here when this happened." Like she's so furious with him. And in the movie, she swings at him, and he definitely kind of like whips his head back and dodges it. And I brought this up to my wife later on, and I was like, I thought that was so brilliant, because this is a character, William Shakespeare, who we followed in the book, and we've seen it in the movie as well. He was abused by his father. And he, even in the book, they talked about how he was like light on his feet. And there's a point, I think, where like Bartholomew or somebody in the book like takes a swing at him, and he dodges it. And it's like he's so used to being swung at, and he's gotten like very vigilant about it. And I was like, oh, that's so cool that they put this in the movie, because it works for him so well that he is able to dodge it in like a very unexpected way. You're like, oh, wow. And then you also, like, my heart breaks for him, because it's like, this is someone who's been abused. And so like to have that come from her had to have been so painful that she's now trying to strike me like my father does. That was a moment, and Jessie Buckley said this in that interview. She did it one time, and it was in that take. He didn't know, nobody knew it was going to happen. She said she didn't even know it was going to happen. She doesn't know where it came from. She just decided to swing at him, and she intended to hit him. But he dodged it. And she thought that Chloe hated the take. She said later, she was like, "Oh, I thought you hated it." And but Chloe's like, no, after I saw it, I was like, that's the take we're going to use.
Yeah.
So I thought that was such a cool moment of that like magic, because they were talking about the scene and how everything enabled them to embody that moment and these characters. And that comes across when you can, like, she just decided to do this thing. And yet he was able to behave in a way that was so appropriate. And you can read so much into. That's just like a magic that can happen, I think. And it's so cool to catch it on film.
I felt like in that scene, and I don't want to be like, oh, I felt this. I definitely intuited it. No,
Yeah.
like, I'm just saying, like,
I thought it was a brilliant story decision, because you could write that moment. You know what I mean? You could see how you take it from the book and you put it in there.
Totally. But it felt like a moment of spontaneity. The way that they both reacted was like, and there was like a beat after the swing happens and he dodges it. And I'm like it's almost like, did they break?
Well, after that, he actually kind of envelops her, because she gets really mad and she tries to like storm away, and he kind of grabs her and they fall to the ground. It's a very physical scene, and they were talking about this.
It looked dangerous.
Moment.
Like it looked like one of them could have been hurt for sure.
Yeah,
like,
she was like really fighting to like get out of there, and he like kind of holds her and like kind of contains her grief while she's like having this really intense reaction.
And you know, hopefully they were both safe and everything, but it did look like
I mean, it seemed like it. I'll link that. People should watch this little Vanity Fair thing. You should watch it. It was really good.
Yeah, I'd love to. I love those things. I watch them all the time.
A little teaser for it. Paul Mescal talks about how he was instructed to act like a penis in that scene.
Very nice. Yeah, cool. That's a difficult note. That's a difficult note to pull off. Like, okay, in what way?
Yeah. You have to go check it out, because it's very funny.
Yeah, cool. All right, yeah, I think it's time we should talk about this final scene.
Yeah, man, I have so many thoughts. So, yeah, I mean, setting it up, she goes there. She's got the red dress, and I feel like it's got some of its vibrancy back. I think, it makes her stand out in the crowd. We can immediately spot her. I love that they go and see his sort of like humble living arrangement, which we know, that's one of the things we do know, is that he did live in like I think of like an attic of an inn, and it was pretty like humble from what I understand, even though he was sending all this money back home. So like, these are some of the few things that were known about him. And then she goes to the play, and one of the things I love about this is there is a lot of interesting ethics around this, and there are ethics that you will run into as a creative. The question of taking something personal, painful, and fundamental to who you are, especially when it interacts with other people. It's not just yours. This is a shared thing. Maybe it's with my spouse, maybe it's with my family. And saying, I'm going to look at this thing and I'm going to turn it into a piece of art that I'm going to sell, right? I'm going to sell tickets to it. I'm going to sell it as a book. I'm going to sell it as a movie. I love that Agnes's initial reaction is one of, how dare he do this? Our son is not something to be sold. Our son's memory is not something to to be cheapened by turning it into a commodity, right? And
especially because she notes that he had been writing comedies recently.
Yeah, that's what she's heard. He's been writing comedies, yeah. So she's like, how dare he? And we hear, no, it's a tragedy. And she's like, yeah, but the tragedy of his life is not something that he should be selling. And so when she goes, she's mad. Like she's in a position to judge and to be like, what is this, right? And I love that because there is a lot of truth to that feeling. But the reason we're introducing it is because we're about to show the other side of it, right? And she's about to experience it. And so she goes in and she's in the I think they call them the groundlings or something. And this is like the real way these playhouses used to be, where the cheap seats were actually up front, and there was like standing room only basically. And this was all the people who just like paid a penny and wandered in off the street to watch this stuff.
In the dirt, in the mud.
Yeah, and they were known, like I've always heard this, it may be apocryphal, but the whole idea of break a leg, by the way. Yeah. Do you know about this? Where break a leg comes from?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. Supposedly, I don't know if you've heard this particular. Maybe you have a different answer, but supposedly it's because the people who would stand in the front were known for being kind of low intelligence and would become so enthralled with what they were watching that they would start to drool, and that drool would collect on the edge of the version that I've heard. At the edge of the stage. And so when you would come out to do your big soliloquy, you would have to be careful not to slip on the drool. But if you slipped on the drool, it was a sign that you had been killing it as an actor. And so if you were to break a leg, it was a sign that you were so good that you enthralled the audience that they created a pool of drool that you would slip on. Again, maybe completely apocryphal, but this is what I heard at one point, and I just love the idea of it. It's so funny.
I think that's awesome. I had never heard that version before. If that's the true version, that's crazy. That's not what I'd heard. Yeah, so seeing the Globe Theater too, like, which is such an iconic piece of like history with theater and storytelling.
I mean, like that's one of those things where like you'd like to be transported back in time and to see one of Shakespeare's plays be put on at the Globe Theater. One of the craziest things you could experience.
Time machine. I think there would definitely be a handful, a large group of people who would go there. Like that is history manifest. Yeah.
Yeah, and this is one of the things a film can do for you. She's able to recreate this and try and make it look like as much like it should.
Which it was a replica constructed by the production team. It wasn't like a. I think people would have thought that they'd go to Shakespeare's Globe, which is like a true stage that still exists to this day, a true theater. But they felt that it was too ornate for the film, so in its modern.
Well, that's the thing. That's the modern version. It's been probably modified a million times over the years. You got to like try and capture the way that it would have been.
Yeah. And it looked incredible. I mean, it's so classically theater, the way that setup is. I mean, you can see it it's what I think of when I think of theater, is that theater. And so to see it and like, the tiered seating with the class system of the nobles and the royalty
all the rich
above
people up and top. Yeah. That's like one of the few times where you see almost like the royal costumes and stuff, but like they're so distant and not prominent. They're there, in the back. But anyway, so she comes in with her brother. And this is very different from the book. I just want to say, in the book, this entire sequence occurs in a single chapter, or maybe even just like a single section, and it's quite brief in the scope of the entire story. And I love that this scene lasts. It's probably like a good 15 minutes long, and I love the way that we let it breathe, and we showed different dynamics to it. We showed different moments from the play. It wasn't just like one, which is really all she experiences in the book. It's
a great note too of like, it's so engaging and you're so locked in that I think if everyone saw this kind of theater, or if if this is I think people will get too wrapped up in like Broadway, and that's theater. And like there's different types of, that's musical theater, sometimes it's dramatic theater. It's the last 15 minutes of the movie, and I was completely engrossed, and I'm just like, I couldn't take my eyes off of it. The performers were spot on perfect, which just goes to show like there's that repetition to these performances in theater, and like that's so cool that they actually developed like a troupe within the film that was like working to make this perfect. And then the way that they shot it was just masterful.
So Agnes is like losing her mind. she's someone who is out of her element. She's in a giant crowd, probably the most people she's ever been around. She's in a place she's never been. She's only ever heard about this kind of stuff. And she's watching this play, and she already is thinking, this is sacrilegious. How dare he do this? And a character comes out named Hamlet, who looks like her son, and she's at first kind of astounded that he looks like her, and then they're talking about kings and she's like, what does this have to do with my son? She starts getting angry and like yelling, and she's like kind of being a heckler almost in the audience. Like she doesn't know how to behave in the audience, right? And people are getting mad at her. And even her brother's kind of like, oh, maybe don't make such a big scene. So I loved all of that because her just absolutely killing it as a performance. It's like we're watching what's happening on the stage, but she's just in the crowd. Like that's where our eyes are immediately locked on, right? Like her reaction to this. And then you get the moment where he comes out, William, and he's all in white, and he's got the powder on his face, and he's the ghost, right? And this is, I think, the first moment where she starts to turn, and she starts to see what he's done, right? Like, and that he is now through this thing he's created, because this goes back to Hamnet and him never really got to say goodbye. Like they had this moment where they kind of each get more distant from one another, and then like he's died before he gets back, and so he never had a chance to say goodbye to him. So he has this moment in the play where he can do that through the characters he's created, right? It's not him, it's not his son, and yet it is. And I think that's the way that art can be so powerful, because like no one in the audience other than her understands that that's what's going on, and yet they are connecting with the emotion of it, and they're seeing it and reacting to it, because she's not alone. She's not the only one who's having this strong reaction. We see all these people who are caught up in it, and like it's hard for us to even fathom what it would have been like to go to a play like this in that time period when you are not surrounded by stories in the way that we are now. We don't have them on our phones. We don't have them on TV. You had to go to something like this, and this was unheard of. Shakespeare's writing about like real things that feel real to people and are touching. I mean, these are stories that are legendary to this day, and he's doing it in a time period when no one's doing this. So it's just incredible to think about in that scope, but then also to see her having this very personal reaction that, again, I think has been very earned by the movie up to this point. And then we get a few moments where we go through some different scenes, and we see the sword fight, which immediately links to her premonition she had about her son that seemed to be wrong in the moment, that he was going to one day perform on stage in one of his father's plays. And we see the actor doing it instead. And so you get a sense that there's this connection there. And we also occasionally get these cuts, and maybe this happens a little bit later, but where we see Hamnet, because we saw when he died, he was kind of in this liminal space that was like the stage, but not. He's alone on it, and there's the darkness of the door that he's approaching, and he stops and turns around, and he sees the hawk, and seems to almost see the audience too. There's like these kind of fourth wall breaking moments where he's like looking at us almost.
It's like he's looking at Agnes too. Like this is the premonition she has, like being fulfilled, and the like she has like some way of seeing through death into the afterlife of where he is, and that he's okay, and that he's like living on through this moment. And then like the hawk, and that idea of the hawk carrying forward like the heart and the dreams and everything that they talked about previously, and how if as long as you remember somebody in this way and you have that moment, then they will like live on through you and you through them. We get multiple parts of the play. It doesn't make sense. How does this connect to all the like? How could Hamlet possibly be about Shakespeare and his relationship with his family and all that stuff? Through the emotion of the scene, you see Agnes like slowly start to open a little more and start to interpret. And I think that anytime that we were asked to read Shakespeare in school, anything for school was like, when I was growing up, was like a chore, right? Mm-hmm. It's like, they're giving me homework, they're giving me something to do.
That's the only time I've read Hamlet, by the way, was in school.
I remember being like resistant to starting it, and it being kind of hard to grasp onto, and what are they saying? Like I need to interpret every line, like what is this, what's happening? And then slowly you sort of like fall into it. It's so universal that it's transcending generations and like hundreds of years. To get to us in high school reading about it, right? And I think that Agnes, she's seeing the first performance of it ever, and she's slowly like breaking into it, and then like allowing it to hit her, and then what it means obviously for her, because it's so close to her, is like it's so I don't know, emotional.
It's so powerful because she's feeling these emotions, and you can see them on her face. Again, just unbelievable performance, and yet she also is turning to the crowd and seeing other people reacting and getting sad and getting teary-eyed. She can understand for a moment. She's like, I get it now. It's like you have taken our grief and shared it with people, and they can feel it too, like the loss.
Well, and that's particularly like when she reaches out and is grabbing his hand.
All right, let's talk about this moment. Big moment. So this is the one I wanted to talk about the most, because there is, it's not really a needle drop. It's kind of a needle drop on the nature of daylight, which is Max Richter's most famous piece It's appeared in, I think, over a dozen different films now.
So it's from an album that he developed in 2004,
Yep.
though, and it's just gone on to have this legacy in film.
And we've talked about it. It was developed in response to the Iraq War. It's kind of like a standalone piece. The album was a standalone piece. It wasn't a score for a film. And yet he has been used in different movies. So on this podcast, it was used in Shutter Island, and it was used in Arrival, both for very powerful, poignant, emotional moments. And we talked about how we felt like it really, I think Arrival was like the one for it. That was the moment that felt the best for it. I might still think that's the best moment for it, but I fully recognize that might just be because of the primacy of that. Like, I don't actually think I probably did see Shutter Island before Arrival, but I didn't realize it. Arrival was the one where that music stuck with me, and I sought it out later, and I was like, what was that song? And like, and it always makes me think of Arrival. So I had a mixed reaction when I heard it, because part of me was like, I wish it had been a new score, like a new piece that had a similar power to it, but it wasn't. It was one I was very familiar with. And this is a piece of music that I find to be incredibly moving when I listen to, regardless of film.
Yes.
That was the one where I was like, oh, is it because they really want me to be sad? Is this like, we're really going to take this music that we know everybody loves and finds to be sad, and we're going to hit you with it? And so I was a little mixed on it. But then, if anything, this was my reaction afterwards. It was kind of a testament to the moment and to the movie that it was like a hiccup for me that then I was able to get over, because what I was seeing was so profound, and the moment was so powerful, and the use of the music was so good that I kind of got over it pretty quickly, and instead just kind of engaged with it as it was. What a moment it is. Jessie Buckley, apparently, I read this in a different interview. Maybe I started talking about another interview. She and Chloé had been going back and forth, and Maggie, I guess. I'm not really sure how this communication was working, but they hadn't quite figured out this final scene and how they wanted it to go. And Max Richter said, maybe this is a Max Richter interview I read. Originally, this was going to be silent. Jessie Buckley had the idea of reaching out her hand to take the hand of the actor. That was her idea. And what gave her the idea, or I don't know the exact order, but according to Max Richter, she had messaged Chloé and sent her this song by him and said, this is the song we should use. So she had like found it independently. I mean, maybe she's just aware of it. I don't know. And then like apparently her listening to this music gave her the idea for the scene, and she was able to talk with Chloé about it, and they were able to discuss the idea of her taking the hand of the actor, and then the rest of the crowd reaching out their hands as well. So this moment sort of grows organically through this collaboration between actor and director, and the music becomes a piece of that sort of creation of it. So Max Richter, I'm not sure if he was already on to score it or not, but Max Richter, the creator of that piece of music, is scoring the film, and he said it felt wrong to try and do a different thing there. It was like that was a part of what was the creation of this moment, and so he used it. And it also reminded me, because I looked into it, and I'm pretty sure this is true, I don't think any of those other films where it appears are films that he scored. They're other scores that his songs appear in. This is a movie where he scores the entire movie, and it's a fantastic score, by the way. There's like a choral arrangement with it's all women, and it's like dark and mysterious, and I don't know, but just profound. Like, I love the score. I've been listening to it, so I'm like, I want to give it to him. Like, it's his music, it's his song, and yes, he probably licensed it for these other movies, but like he wanted to use it in his movie that he's scoring. And he chose this scene to say, like, yes, this is the one I'm going to put it in. It made me feel better about it, because that was my one, like, I had a little bit of a hiccup. So I'm really curious to know from you, when you hear that song come in, what was your reaction?
I was surprised that they used the song. I didn't have a negative reaction to it, though. I think I noted that they were using the song. I was like, oh, wow, they're using this song. I also didn't know at the time that Max Richter scored the film.
Yeah.
I knew that was his work originally, but I didn't know he scored the entire film.
Yeah.
So it starts playing, and I really just worked through it rapidly, and I was able to like say, this is a familiar song. Hamlet is a familiar story. there's like some connective tissue here for me to say like, I don't tend to think, at least, unless it's like, I don't know, super iconic works, but this has already been used multiple times in multiple different projects. Yeah. So I don't feel like it necessarily, like, yes, maybe Arrival's the first thing that I think of, but like for me right now, I think of it as like, now it's kind of entered the landscape of like, it doesn't really have ownership by any particular film. Well, maybe Arrival originally was the one that I thought of. Now I think of many other projects with it. So yeah, it wasn't even really a hiccup for me.
Well, and I think a lot of people will think of that episode from The Last of Us that prominently uses it too, in another very emotional moment.
Yeah, great episode, but probably the best episode of the show too.
Yeah. So yeah, again, kind of mixed, but like that's where I ended up at it. And then reading the stuff later from X Richter like made me, like, I'm kind of 100% down for it now.
And I want to know like what happens in the actual scene though, because her grabbing the hand like that is her power to see the future of the people, right? So she grabs the hand of Hamnet in this moment, and she can possibly, what is she seeing? We don't know what she's seeing, but what is she seeing as far as like, is this actually like,
I like that you said Hamnet there, but she's grabbing the hand of Hamlet.
Hamlet,
but it's both.
In essence, Hamnet.
It's both. It's her son. It's her son as a conduit, right?
Right. And so, like, what is she seeing to the future, or is she seeing to the past? Is she seeing this actor rather than her son, or is she? You know,
I love that you said that, because and maybe if I were to go back and watch it, maybe that's the case. Maybe she is doing the thing where she's like squeezing between the fingers. But I actually didn't even think about that. I just thought she was grabbing his hand as a moment of connection and consolation. Because she was so in the moment.
I think it's both, right? I think she maybe even reached out without thinking about, I'm going to use my powers. Maybe she reached out as just a natural reaction to her son, reaching out and saying like, I want to touch my son or whatever again. Like, I need to feel his presence again. And then grabs him. And then I think that soon after we see the young Hamnet like kind of having his moment on the stage at the end before he goes into the darkness.
Yeah, that's when he's in that sort of liminal space.
I think that's how I interpreted the end of the film there.
Yeah. So a couple other things I want to touch on there. There are two other things going on. Because one is that it is, maybe the prime thing is we're seeing Agnes recognize the power of this story to communicate the grief of the loss of their son to everyone present, and she can share in that and have this moment of shared catharsis. And she looks around again and she sees everybody reacting in this way. There's also William Shakespeare backstage, and some of the best Paul Mescal acting stuff going on is his reaction as he's hearing the lines. He has at some point along the way he spots her in the crowd. Oh, it's when she says, "Look back at me." Once again, the callback to the wedding, and he is in tears, and but then he's also smiling at one point, right? So like he's caught up in his emotion. He's kind of peeking out at it too, so he sees her reacting. He starts to see her reacting positively, which I think is like a really powerful moment for him. Like she gets it now. She understands what I've done here. So this is all going on, and then there's this little story going on with the actor playing Hamlet, who, as we've said before, is being played by the real life brother of the actor who played the young Hamnet. He's playing Noah Jupe is playing Hamlet in the play. Again, this is why I think it is the same actor as before when he's saying again, because I think this little story culminates here where he struggled in the past, and now in this moment he's doing a good job. But I think when he sees the effect, there's like a moment in his eyes, and it's such a good little acting decision where he sees the reaction. He's surprised. He doesn't expect anybody to grab him while he's giving this speech, right? And he looks out and he sees the reaction people are having, and you can feel him let go and sort of truly embody the character and connect. And he becomes that conduit, like we talked about. I love that moment. I think it was powerful, and it's occurring while all these other powerful things are happening. But we're seeing the magic of acting and the magic of nailing a performance and connecting with an audience. And so this is all happening at the same time. And so the result is a catharsis. And we see, not only do we see William Shakespeare smiling, we see Agnes starts to laugh. And it's like the first time we've seen her seem to have joy since the death of her son. And this is where we end up ending the movie. And I just thought it was just a brilliant bit of catharsis. Oh, well, that music's swelling, and it's just like, oh my God, it's so good.
There's a bit of like the audience, all audiences will mourn the death of her son. She's not alone in this grief for the rest of time, really. And I thought that was so powerful. What an awesome movie. I think this is a good chance for us to now jump into book versus movie. Mm-hmm. I think this is an interesting one because Maggie O'Farrell was so directly connected to both.
Yeah.
But I'll start and I'll go pretty quick. I love that like this is a second chance and a collaborative effort in such a major way to bring a story like this to life as a troupe, as we've talked about, almost as like a theater troupe of collaborating, just best ideas kind of bubbling to the surface and seeing like people acting and directing at the top of their games and like this affecting audiences in such a major way. I'm going to give it to the movie in this instance. And just because I felt like, while I absolutely love the book, honestly, the way that the film moved me was so much more like visceral, and seeing it and like the grief and the performance, Jessie Buckley, like that performance alone will stick with me forever and enter that pantheon of like greatest performances I've seen. Yeah, I just think like Chloé Zhao, like I'm just going to continue to watch anything that she produces and creates at this point, because she just like has such an eye for finding something that I feel to be like true in this world, in this life, you know. And that's just like the way that these stories can affect. And in this story, it's very meta, but like just like the way that stories can affect us in more than just like an entertainment or like I identify with that, but like down to like a grounded fundamental level. And I think that's what this film did for me.
Yeah, man. I am with you. I am going to give it to the movie here. It is a culmination of the creative collaboration between brilliant artists. I love that book. We talked about it last week. I thought it was brilliantly written. I think that her prose is on another level. It was beautiful and powerful, but everything that I loved about the book is here. A couple smart things were omitted. We didn't even talk about how, like in the book, Shakespeare is not faithful to Agnes, and that becomes a sticking point in their relationship. He's sought comfort in other women, and it complicates things in an interesting way. But I think in a way that detracts from this final moment we've been talking about, to where I think it was smart to not put it in the movie.
I agree, yeah.
So I just think there was a lot of smart decisions made here. This isn't a 1-for-1. There were changes made, and yet I loved them. I really felt like these changes just kind of took what was there and made it even more powerful and impactful. And we're going to expand on the end. We're going to let this scene be, kind of steal the show at the end. Yeah, I agree, man. This is one where couple things. I think, in previous, I think last season and maybe the year before, I don't know, there's been a few seasons where we start the year off with an absolute banger, and I go, yeah, this might be my favorite of the year. I think this is going to absolutely be in the conversation for us at the end of the year, especially for me, of like, this might be the best adaptation I see this year. I don't know. Absolutely loved it. And 5 years from now, if we're still doing this podcast, which I hope we are, because it's just fun and I like doing it. And we get a chance to consider this for our Adaptation Hall of Fame, a thing we've started doing. And that's our sort of eligibility requirement. I think this is one that might damn near make it in, because I think this is a fantastic adaptation.
I think it's a modern classic. I think we've said as much through this entire coverage, and I'm glad that we've been able to kind of work our way through it as methodically as it needed, because it has so much substance to it. It's very rich, and like I just had such a great time with it. And this is like, I just love when filmmaking can mean so much and to so many different people in so many different ways, and yet be so universal.
So stick around to the very end of this episode, where we're going to announce our next project, which you'll be getting next week. But if you enjoyed our coverage of Hamnet, please let us know in the form of a rating and review on whatever app you chose to listen on. Chime in the comments if you're on YouTube or anywhere else where you can leave a comment. Let us know how you felt about the movie, how you felt about the book. Were you in tears? I'm curious to know people's reactions. And also just like, anything we missed. I know there's a lot of metaphor symbols, I feel like we kind of touched on, but maybe not, we didn't cover it all. Also, you can check us out on Discord, something we're trying to emphasize a lot this year. We're having a lot of conversations on Discord. We're going to have a dedicated thread for every project we covered. So there's a Hamnet thread on our Discord where we'd love to have you come and chat with us. And that'll be an evergreen area. So even if you come to this episode 6 months from now, a year from now, whatever, you can come to that thread in our Discord and join the conversation. That's our idea for it. Yep. So we'd love to have you join us there. That'll be a link in the show notes. So go down there, click it, and join us on Discord.
And also be sure to connect with us in other ways. We're on Facebook, Instagram, Blue Sky, TikTok, all of those at Ink to Film.
And if you'd like to support this podcast in another way, we have a Patreon. On Patreon, you're going to be able to vote on polls that will help us choose a project every quarter of the year. So every few months, we have a fully community-selected project. Also, we have monthly bonus episodes that we put on there, which are like other alternate adaptations to projects we've already covered, sequels, things like that are like maybe a little bit outside of our normal purview on the podcast. That's going to be where you want to go for that. We'd love to have your support. It's patreon.com/inktofilm.
And thank you to Ross Bugden for the use of our intro and outro music.
All right, man. All that's left to do is to announce our next project. We can put Hamnet to bed. What an excellent one. But we're going to be coming back next week with a former guest who joined us originally for Frankenstein. You may remember us covering the Mary Shelley novel. We covered the James Whale film. And then later on, we actually covered the Kenneth Branagh film as like a bonus episode that I think is out on the main feed now. So we've done a lot of Frankenstein over the years, but Del Toro, a favorite of James's, and and a director that I'm quite fond of as well, has done his own Frankenstein adaptation. So we are going to cover that next week with Rachel K. Jones returning to the podcast to join us to talk about her thoughts on it, with us and our thoughts on it. It should be a really interesting conversation, man. I'm excited. Yeah. Have you seen it yet?
I can't wait. No, I haven't seen it.
Specifically,
didn't watch it for the podcast. And it's Guillermo del Toro, and it was out around the holidays, and I wanted to see it in theaters.
I'll admit, I saw it in the theater when it came out. Like I saw it at, projected and everything. So
that's awesome.
But I'm excited to watch it again. Honestly, this is a movie that I think it would be very interesting to return to.
Another one that's in awards contention too. So I cannot wait.
Should be fun. So hopefully you'll join us for that. But until next time,
keep adapting.